One of the biggest questions that has been lingering in my mind is how can I use art to overcome certain difficulties and challenges in life? And in particular, how can I use art to impact the lives of other people in a positive way? And I think that this really comes down to the fact that there lies something beyond the technique in painting. And what lies beyond the technique is something that will be kind of difficult to describe in a very short amount of time. But what I mean is that we are going to use painting today. So we're going to talk about the development of this particular layer of the oil painting in such a way that we kind of get ourselves out of whatever kind of difficulties or whatever kind of troubles we may be going through, and we'll just tune into this world. So here is our model for today, Natalia. And so what we're going to start off with is this gel-like medium. So this is Neo Megilp, and we're going to apply it onto the surface of the painting. So now what I want is to create a world for us, to create an environment where we can be at peace, an environment where we can, the only laws of physics that really applies here are basically the oil paints. And as I apply this layer of Neo Megilp onto the surface, let me explain the palette for you. So I'm using titanium white, flake white, burnt umber, alizarin permanent, cadmium red medium, yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. And those are all artist grade oil paints. And if you're new to this channel and you want to know exactly what materials I'll be using, you can always go ahead and scroll down to the description box below, and I'll have all of that information typed up for you. Now, what I want out of today's video is to go beyond just the simple how to do something. I want to go beyond the usual kind of, this is what you mix to get this color, this is how you apply the brush stroke, and then therefore this is the effect that you get kind of thing. I want to go beyond that today. And I think that in particular, most of us in life, you know, it's not all sunshine and daisies. Most of us are going through certain things in life. And I think that for us painters, those of you that are painters as well, you know that painting kind of puts you in this certain mindset, and it kind of takes you away from all of your troubles or all of the things that may be going on in your life. And so that's the kind of effect that I want to have with these painting videos, or let's just say with this one for now. And really, I'm going to explain, of course, what I'm doing with the painting. So of course we're using a size 6 flat bristle brush with our Neo Megilp medium, and we're combining titanium white, ultramarine blue, and a tiny bit of ivory black. So titanium white, ultramarine blue, and just the tiniest bit of ivory black. So we're going to play along with the idea here that this is our own world. You know, just like Bob Ross always said, this is our world, and in our world, we're free. We have complete freedom to do whatever we want. And what he meant was the canvas. The canvas really is your world, and you're able to do whatever you want in your world. Now, I am painting in a realistic style, or that is, I am painting in a very traditional style. So there's going to be certain aspects in form, color, light, structure that I've been following. So if you haven't seen the previous, I think there are 2 of them, the previous 2 videos of where I started this painting and applied the first color pass on the flesh tones, I'll leave a link in the description box down below if you're curious as to how the painting got to the point where it's at, or where we're starting at today. So again, today is about trying to convey that experience that we painters feel when we are kind of connecting with the canvas. And really, the only laws of physics that apply to this canvas, other than obviously the chemistry and the paints, and anyway, the only real laws of physics are right there, right here on the palette. All of those colors, those are our fundamental laws of physics. Everything else is what we are allowed to do with those laws of physics, meaning with all of these colors that we're mixing. So for instance, we're using a little bit of alizarin permanent and cadmium red. The alizarin permanent is extremely dark, and I think we also added a little bit of ivory black, I believe, or ultramarine blue. But the aim is to get a shape that's pretty dark, but not so dark. And the cadmium red medium is actually a pretty good red to raise the value a little bit, but just a tiny little bit. And again, I'm going to be speaking to you in such a way that, whatever difficulties you may encounter today, or you may have encountered today, this is our own world. I want this to be our kind of place where we can just sit back and relax and just enjoy the experience of painting, because that's what it's all about for me. For me, it's all about conveying the experience for you as much as possible. So again, now we're going for our most emphatic dark accents into the hair. So again, we're painting in a traditional, realistic fashion. So we're using the concept of value. Value basically just means how light or how dark something is, basically on a gray scale. Now, these values are fairly dark in the hair, and I'm going for the darkest accents in the hair. So that is, I'm not trying to follow any particular kind of curl in the model's hair. I'm not looking for any kind of details. I'm not trying to trace or outline anything. What I'm looking for is just very large and simple accents of dark. And I'm covering a little bit more than I need, but I am leaving some surface open for what I'm about to do right now. So I'm combining the cadmium red medium using the same brush, and I'm going to kind of be going back and forth between the cadmium red medium and the color that we've mixed up, that dark accent color. And very quickly now we're going to get the effect of the hair kind of turning over just with a single brush stroke, letting the color in the background kind of intermix with the color in the hair. And again, it doesn't have to be painted completely perfect. It doesn't have to be a photographic rendition or anything like that. It's a miracle really that a couple shapes of value can convey the sense of form at a distance, and that's really going to be your greatest tool to have as a painter, or even in life. In life, this relates to life. Just try to simplify and try to see the big picture, and don't get too caught up on any kind of small details or any kind of little bits of minutia. It's important to look at the big picture. But again, right now, it's all about just being calm, exploring the surface, and just in general having a good time. And what we're doing is we're just exploring all of these little shapes now around the side of the ear, and at the same time, notice how I'm moving the brush back and forth, and back and forth. What I'm doing there is trying to soften the edge for the hairline. Now again, like I'm going to keep saying, we're painting in a very realistic fashion. So when you're painting a portrait, the edge, one of the most important edges to look out for, basically is the hairline. And you really want to keep the edge between the forehead and the hairline very, very soft. It's kind of hard for me to explain why that is, just aesthetically. Just trust me on that. You want the edge between the forehead and the hairline to be extremely soft. And we are softening some of the edges, in particular around the shadow side of the hair. And again, we can do whatever we want with this painting, but I think it's important to keep the edge quality in mind. And we're just cleaning off the brush. That's my little container with my Oderless mineral spirits, and I'm just dabbing it dry onto the paper towel. And I want to maybe halfway clean it. I don't need to completely clean off this brush for what I'm about to do, but I think it's clean enough now at this point. So now you have a very interesting close-up shot of the palette, and with this video today I'm going to try to give you even more close-up shots of the palette, just because I think it might be useful to those of you that are new to painting, or maybe are interested in painting, I think it's a good idea to kind of show you once in a while close-up shots of the paint mixing, though you do get to see most of the paint mixing anyway with the palette right next to the painting. So again, we're establishing our most emphatic darks, in particular around the shoulder. Now, if you look at the photo reference of the model, it's pretty dark around the corners of the shoulder. And so we basically just used Alizarin permanent, and I think it was ultramarine blue, if I'm not mistaken. Either ultramarine blue or ivory black. But Alizarin permanent is the very nice dark red. So again, remember, the palette is basically our fundamental laws of physics, and that's all the laws of physics that we need on this painting. So after cleaning off that brush, the reason I cleaned off that brush was because I'm going to want a very bright red. But here's the trick. I left some of the paint residue in the brush voluntarily. So this is the same brush, and the reason I didn't change into a different brush is because I wanted a very bright red, but that wasn't straight up cadmium red. So the little bit of paint residue that was left in the brush after cleaning it is what is kind of influencing this red to not be such a bright red. And here's another little trick. So we're going to blend this red basically with that dark red that we put into the shoulder to add kind of a softer edge. See how we have a much softer transition between the edges and these shapes? And again, this is our world. We can do whatever we want to this painting, but I think that, excuse the noise in my environment, but anyway, I think that it's important to keep these edges rather soft, especially in the areas of the painting that we don't want to draw attention to. There is some background noise in my room. I apologize. I'm probably going to try to edit that out in my editor. But anyway, so let's go ahead and change brushes here. So this is another clean bristle brush, and we're going to take our time with a very basic flesh tone mixture, and we're going to use this for basically the shoulders, or in particular the clavicles. So we started off with the titanium white, the yellow ochre, a little bit of cadmium red medium, just like you usually see me mix, but now you're getting a very close up and personal shot of the paint mixtures. And now I'm using a little bit of flake white. And remember, flake white has this property that allows you to use more of it without raising the value all the way, which in turn allows you to have much more of a heavy body to the oil paint. And now with the burnt umber and the alizarin permanent, the burnt umber helps to bring down the value a little bit and to basically make it a little bit less saturated, a little bit less bright. And so now we're going to go ahead and apply this flesh tone onto basically below the clavicles. And it's a very simple and easy flesh tone to mix up, so that's why I switched the camera angle to close up, just so you could see how we mixed up that color. Now usually when I'm layering an oil paint, I like to keep the consistency a little bit thinner than this. So this is a little bit more opaque paint that I'm using to paint onto this surface. And again, opaque just means that I'm using less medium. When it's transparent, it means that I'm using more medium. And the medium that I'm talking about is the little gel that you saw earlier, the Megilp medium. And don't worry, you'll see more of that medium a little bit later on in this video. And so again, this isn't really supposed to be a how to paint this and therefore that kind of thing. Rather, I'm trying to convey the experience and the feeling of what it's like to construct this oil painting. Now we're very relaxed. We're just applying a little bit of a darker gradation, and all that means is that we drop the value down a little bit as we're moving to the right of the surface and as we're moving above. So we're using burnt umber to help to drop the value, and pretty much just that. We're just trying to kind of follow our way around these shapes and not really worrying too much about getting the perfect exact photographic rendition of the model. That is not at all what we're after. We're after interpreting visual information and creating a painting. And hey, if you're more into the copying the image that you're looking at mentality, nothing wrong with that. If that is your own personal aesthetic, no problem. So now what we're doing is we're mixing up a half tone, basically right above the suprasternal notch between the two clavicles. Now the suprasternal notch is right below here where the brushstroke is being applied, and we're seeing a little bit of the neck muscles, those little tube-like shapes that we're starting to delineate. And tell you what, especially if you're new to painting, take a look at this area where we're applying the brushstroke. That is a plane change. And if you don't know what a plane change is, a plane change is basically, a plane is just a two-dimensional construct or two-dimensional concept of a flat sheet in three-dimensional space. And if that's too confusing, look at my canvas. It is a flat sheet in three-dimensional space, the three-dimensional space being the room. And that canvas has an angle in relation to the light source in my studio. So if those of you that are interested in photographing your own artwork, the idea of plane and angles of planes is actually pretty important, because you always want your light source to be at an angle. You don't ever want it to be straight onto your canvas, because your canvas will glare. So those of you that are wondering how I'm filming with this particular setup with minimal glare, it's because the light source is at a very sharp, almost acute like angle away from the surface of the painting. So now what are we doing with the neck? So what we're doing is, after we put in that simple basic plane change that kind of like a sculptor would chop at a little slab of clay, now all we're doing is just applying intermediate planes, intermediate value changes such as this one right here. Remember, each plane change is indicated by a change in value, and if the value happens to get lighter, as it did near the sternocleidomastoid, basically the neck muscles, as it gets lighter, all it means is that that surface is facing the light a little bit more. When it gets darker, that means that the surface is facing the light a little bit less. And when it's in shadow, that means that it is parallel to the light source. Basically, the division between light and shadow happens when a certain plane has a parallel angle. So basically, it is completely away from the rays of light that's hitting it. And again, I know I'm talking kind of technical stuff about how to make something look realistic, but again, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a perfect rendition of the model. Certainly my drawing isn't 100% perfect. Certainly my values aren't 100% perfect. But again, there lies something beyond the technique. And that is basically what lies between you and your canvas. And that is the physical application of the brush stroke onto the canvas, and the way that the brush stroke is applied onto the canvas, the mindset that you have when you're applying your brush strokes onto your canvas. Again, we are not human photocopiers, and there is so much visual poetry in a realistic painting, or in an abstract painting, expressionist painting, impressionist painting, whichever kind of painting that you are into. There is so much visual poetry in the development of the painting. Whichever type of style of painting you choose is completely up to you. But again, really the main topic of this video is to talk about what lies beyond the technique. And I think what lies beyond the technique is the kind of sense of emotion that you feel when you connect with your painting, when you're cleaning your brushes. How do you feel when you're cleaning your brushes? How do you feel when you stand back from your painting? And ultimately, what do you want your painting to do for others? And I think that's one of the most important things that we as artists should think about. How can our artwork impact the lives of others, the people that view our artwork? Because I want people to get something more out of, oh, that looks like a realistic person. Cool. I want something more than that. I want something more than, oh, that's a very technically masterful painting. I want something beyond that. So you can see kind of how my own personality is portrayed in the certain brush strokes and the textures. Notice how there's a lot of free-flowing brush strokes showing around the neck, and then around the eyes it's a little bit more soft and subtle. And again, this is all down to your own personality, and your personality will always show. You can have hundreds of classically trained artists, classically trained painters that studied in the same exact way, and you will be able to identify and differentiate their artwork from one another. And again, that little motion that I made with my hand was actually kind of following the sternocleidomastoid from one side to the other side. So basically just following along the neck muscles. And again, it's really all about the visual poetry, I think. Notice how I'm choosing to soften these edges around the neck, and it's kind of straight, the shadow of the neck, whereas on the photo reference it's a little bit more curved and angled, and that's okay. It doesn't always have to be exactly what you're looking at. You don't always have to depict everything exactly the way it is, and it will still read as something three-dimensional in space, so long as you have your light and your shadow. But again, if you're new to painting and you're really kind of timid about painting portraits, I will tell you it gets easier. And I don't mean that the painting gets easier. I mean that you get more acclimated to the psychological aspect of creating a depiction of someone else onto a canvas. Now, there's a lot to be said with that. And again, we're talking about beyond the painting. So beyond the technique, beyond the painting lies basically a type of psychological being, a type of psychological state of mind. When you're painting a portrait of someone, you really want to think about not only what they look like, but their own personalities, their own kind of aspects to them. And that's why I like to paint people that I know or people that I have met. And I'm not against painting pictures of people that I have never met before, because of course I've done that in the past. But for instance, Natalia has a very strong personality, and I'm speaking of the model that I'm painting currently here. Natalia has a very strong personality, and strong meaning that she seems, when you talk to her in person, she seems like a very powerful woman and someone that carries a very strong presence to her. She's very confident, and she's very very humble. Okay, so she's very confident and she's very humble at the same time, and we're trying to convey that type of emotion within this painting. And not to get too overly technical with the psychological aspect of it, again, even the act of cleaning the paint brushes. Now, if you look at a Bob Ross demonstration, if you look at Bob Ross, and when he cleans his brushes, he's like, this is the best part of the technique. That's what he'll say. And really, all of it is an experience. Painting really is an experience. It is an epic journey. So again, even the mixing of the paint, the physical mixing of the paint, combining this colored mud, this pigment, in such a way that it emulates the beauty in nature that you're seeing, the magnificence of nature. It's a very, very unique experience, and it's an experience that I want to bring to you. That's why I have you here in close-up view, and again, that's why I'm making this video in the way that I'm making it, because notice how much fun it is to really just almost instantaneously create a very elaborate value scale on the palette, just letting the color that's on the brush influence the subsequent puddles of color that we're mixing. So going from the top down to the bottom, knowing that the paint that's within the brush will influence the puddles. Now we're actually doing that, moving up. So basically combining all of the reds and the yellows and the halftones with the flake white. Flake white tends to live kind of in the halftone, the middle halftone range, and then titanium white is in the lighter range. So now we have a smaller brush. Notice we just put the Neo Megilp on it. And so now we're going to take that smaller brush and we're going to start to get very, very specific with these colors and with very subtle value changes on the portrait. And now we're going to take our time and really slow down with these shapes. And tell you what, rather than, the usual kind of thing you've probably seen me and listened to me convey in past videos, you know how I always say that this plane change is getting darker because it's angling away from the light, but it's still in the light, so it's not as dark as the shadow, that kind of thing that you always hear me say. I am going to describe what I'm doing with the painting, but I want to also talk about the mindset, that change in our mindset when we transition from big picture things into smaller things. So moving in from the larger macro view of things into the smaller micro view of things. Now the thing is that there's a change in mindset, okay? So we're looking at the smaller shapes in relation to one another, and it's going to take a little bit of patience. So this stage of the painting, I'm not going to lie to you, this stage of the painting is one of the stages that takes the most patience, and that is because most of the brushstrokes that I apply aren't actually going to be conveyed in the final painting. Rather, I'm trying to notice how I kind of almost wiped away the value that I had there. Really, it's about exploration and experimentation among the shapes and knowing that the concepts of value. So notice how we're tinting this color a little bit. So it's going to live around the same area in terms of the relative value, but it's just going to get a little bit warmer in hue. So now, really, the mindset is of complete focus. And in a couple videos ago, you heard me complaining about noise around my environment. And one thing about me is when I'm in this stage or this level of focus in my painting, any kind of noises around me completely distracts me. And once I'm distracted, once I'm taken away from that mindset, from that focus, it's very hard for me to get back into that focus. Doesn't mean it's impossible, because of course I've done it so many times before, but now as you're listening to me speak to you, I am speaking to you after this painting was finished. That is, I'm speaking to you in voiceover. I have a headset in my ears and I'm able to finally sit down and relax, look over the footage and explain it to you step by step, and explain how I was feeling within each and every shape. So again, this is much more. I want this to be much more than a demonstration. I want this to be much more than a how-to. And that is, I really want to convey the sense of patience and concentration and focus that is involved in this stage. So I'll share some interesting bits of information about me. So as I clean off this brush, I notice I really like this shot. But anyway, so I truly believe that there is a future to painting. I truly believe that there is a future to portrait painting, traditional painting, classical painting, impressionist painting, abstract painting, and so. I do believe that there is a future to painting, and I think that the combination of this technology, video, and this traditional art approach, such as what we're doing right now, is very traditional. We're actually glazing that color that you saw me mix on the palette. So I mixed up a very warm and kind of darkish color on the palette and used quite a bit of Neo Megilp medium. And now what I'm doing is I'm kind of evenly distributing that warm tone. So therefore I'm glazing. Glazing is a very classical approach. It's a very traditional technique. But now back to the topic of this video. I want to create an experience for you. I want to create an experience for the viewer, and I want to take you on this journey. I want to take you along with me, and whatever problems you may be encountering in your life, whatever problems I may be encountering in my life, I want this time that we have here, notice how we're just cleaning off the brush, just kind of moving it around, kind of almost like a little bit of a worm. I want this to be our time. I want this to be our time where we don't have to worry about whatever problems we may have, complications we may have in life, or anything like that. This is our own personal little escape. This is our own personal little time where we get to sit back, relax, apply a little bit of critical thinking in terms of creating a realistic depiction of something that we're observing in nature. But at the same time, I want this to be our own way of tuning out the difficulties or whatever kind of negativity may be out there in the world. And just tune in to the painting, the experience of painting, because this is an experience. And I think that the experience is the answer to the main question. And the main question is basically what lies beyond technique. And I think what lies beyond technique is the experience. Not only the experience for you as the creator of the painting, but the experience for the viewer. A viewer walking across a museum. Imagine what they would have in their mind of seeing Rembrandt's turpentine or Rembrandt's mineral spirits or whatever kind of materials he may have used. Imagine seeing Rembrandt's palette, seeing him mix these colors on his palette back in the 17th century or whatever time period. I think that was 17th century. Yes, 17th century. So anyway, I'm not an art historian, okay? But in any case, really, I want the viewer to get something out of these videos that perhaps they may have never gotten out of observing in a finished painting hanging in a gallery. In essence, I want the development of these paintings to also be an art form. And an art form that takes you on an experience, takes you on a journey. So now let's get back to what I'm doing with the painting, just so I also I continue to guide you through the painting. What we're putting in now is an accent, and it's a dark accent. Remember, an accent is when one form meets another form, but the shadows are so light in this photo reference. I will tell you that this probably isn't the best photo reference to use, in my opinion, for a painting, just because the shadows are so light. But this dark shape here is basically the accent where the form shadow of the face kind of turns inwards towards the mandible and therefore receives less light, and then gets lighter as the values taper down towards the neck. So you can see that the shadow is a little bit lighter in this painting than my usual portrait painting videos and tutorials that you've seen me do in the past. So now what we're doing is we're applying a little bit of whatever kind of dark red we can find on the palette. And yes, I said whatever kind of dark red on the palette, because to tell you the truth, at some instances in the painting, you just feel it out. You feel things out. You take whatever's on the palette and you just apply it onto the painting. And it's kind of a rhythmic movement in your mind. And that's why I say that this is a type of poetry, a type of visual poetry, in a sense that we are kind of combining bits and pieces of information that we're observing, and we're interpreting it, and then we're placing it down, and not such a literal fashion, but in an interpretive kind of fashion. And again, it's all about the experience. And I think that's the biggest thing that I want to convey with this video. I really want to be able to take you on this journey with me. Notice how we're putting in the dark accent in between the upper lip and the lower lip. So we have a little dark accent there. And then we're going to put in another dark accent on the other side of the nostril. But again, this is our world. I want this to really be a space where you can just sit back, relax, and tune in to the process, and also to the mindset and the thought process involved in creating these works. So now, just cleaning off the brush yet again, we're going to add a little bit more of our Neo Megilp medium. And so we're going to put in a very fine little detail. And by fine little detail, it's going to be a kind of a large detail. So we're combining Ultramarine blue, Ivory black onto this darker region of the palette. I hope you're enjoying the close-up shots of the palette and the paint mixing. So we just sketched in a very basic shape now for the jewelry that the model is wearing, or in particular the necklace. So I kind of skipped through some of the mundane filling in the color stuff because, I think that's important to just see all of this stuff emerge and see how just a few simple shapes, such as this brushstroke right here, is actually a little bit of dark flesh tone that we're using for the cast shadow, and that's it. That's all you need to convey the sense of the jewelry in 3 dimensions, and painting it in a very quick and simple and easy fashion. Again, it's all about the mindset involved in creating these paintings. Very relaxing, but at the same time very focused. And I think that's just, in particular, that's my personality coming through in the painting. Everyone has their own personality. Everyone has their own unique touch. You may have a much more accurate way of depicting a portrait. You may have a much more expressive way of depicting a portrait than me. All forms of art are perfectly beautiful and perfectly valid as long as they're seen in the right context. And again, what I really want you to get out of this painting, we only have a couple of minutes left, is just to sit back, relax, and enjoy the process. Always give yourself some time out of the day. I know your day may be very busy. You may have a lot of stuff to think about, many responsibilities, but what I want is for you to have some time to sit back, relax, and really to observe nature and to enjoy the act of observation, whatever it may be you're observing. Maybe you're observing a still life object, maybe you're observing a landscape, or whatever kind of, subject matter that you're observing. I just want you to be able to sit back, relax, and give yourself some time to observe the beauty that we see in nature and the beauty that it is to be able to construct these paintings. That being said, with the neck, all you saw me do there was just soften the edges. Literally, I just thought that the edges were too sharp on the neck, so I used some intermediate value changes just to kind of soften it, because I did kind of lose track of some of the structures on the neck, I admit, when I was painting this area of the painting. So one thing you'll often hear me say is, when in doubt, blur it out. So that's what I was doing at this stage with the neck. And with the chin, this is going to be one of the very last touches, one of the very last brush strokes on this painting. It's just to soften that shape around the chin. And that being said, I really hope that today's video helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork. I hope that I was able to convey the experience of creating this painting to you, or at least this sitting of the painting. That being said, I really hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll be back again very soon.